At this time, I'd like to invite Ms. Amy Vandeveer on stage. She is the Air Force's subject matter expert on installation planning from the Air Force Civil Engineering Center in San Antonio, Texas. She's a senior planner with Tyndall Program Management Office, leading the Air Force Master Planning Team and designing the 21st century Air Force base of the future that Tyndall will become. Ms. Vandeveer.
Thank you. It's a great privilege to be here today, and I'm going to echo some of the same words that you heard from Colonel Laidlaw and Colonel Matthews as I talk about how we're planning, what we're planning, kind of our timelines for what we're looking at. We've got a lot of really great ideas, and I know there's a lot of familiar faces in the audience, and you've heard us talk in the Air Force about our 21st century installations of the future. A lot of buzzwords. We're going to talk about some specifics that we're looking at for Tyndall in terms of how we can build back the base to be more resilient and better meet mission requirements and be more efficient for both operations and keeping the base for the next however many years that it's going to be here. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with what my slides are. We do have an unprecedented opportunity due to an unfortunate turn of events to relook at the way the Air Force organizes our installations to provide combat power. For several years, the Air Force has been talking about what an installation of the future looks like from many different perspectives: sustainable, smart, healthy, resilient. As a long-range facility planner, Tyndall provides a unique opportunity to make some bold moves and implement multiple strategies aligned with what we've envisioned an installation in the future will look like and how we'll operate to provide cost-effective and efficient combat operations. As Colonel Laidlaw described in his presentation, Tyndall Air Force Base was opened, first opened in January 1941. We just celebrated the 78th anniversary of Tyndall Air Force Base 2 weeks ago. If you do the math, 1941, it was 78 years ago. And we've been flying air-to-air combat training almost since the inception of the Air Force in 1947. Why do I bring that up? Because some of our facilities that we were still operating out of are nearly 78 years old. Some of them are a little younger, but in general, our base, Tyndall Air Force Base, was almost 80 years old. And we're going to rebuild Tyndall to last at least another almost 80 years. Next slide. As we look at the future, we'll build facilities which meet today's mission needs while also meeting the future mission needs that we haven't even considered yet. We tend to build facilities with a 50-year lifespan, and in the Air Force, we stretch that life to 80 years or more. Our fighter aircraft have a much shorter lifespan, in the 30-year average. As we look to rebuild Tyndall, we'll be planning for the next mission set as well as the next mission set. We'll be including smart technology in the facilities and building in resilience and sustainability. As we look at how the facilities support missions, we'll be re-looking at service delivery models as well as opportunities to leverage partnerships with the community and industry. We'll be reorganizing the installation to make operations more efficient. We'll be pursuing strategies such as moving functions, as we talked about with the Civil Engineering Squadron, off the flight line, which don't need to be on the flight line. Consolidating multiple small facilities into larger, more flexible facilities. Concentrating our airmen support activities into walkable campuses. And moving functions off base or closer to the perimeter to enable some what we hope are very fantastic partnerships in the future. While Hurricane Michael definitely provided some opportunities for reshaping Tyndall, there was another reshaping enabler already in the works, as the Florida Highway Department had already committed to building flyovers for Highway 98, which has been in the works for many years. And within the next couple of years, we will have unimpeded access between the flight line and the support sides of the base. The hurricane slowed down the start just a little, but not much. We're really excited about that opportunity starting in the next few months. It's almost the perfect storm, so to speak, with the ability to reshape the way the base is organized. As we saw in the video, we're looking at using a framework that talks to our districts that we use for planning, our planning districts. We're going to build on the initial assessments, which you heard Colonel Matthews speak about, and we're executing a fast-tracked master planning effort using the planning framework, which divides the base into 7 planning areas or districts. The majority of the rebuilding will happen in the western districts, the flight line, the support, and the Sabre. For those of you familiar with the installation, the flight line and support districts will be connected at ground level, unimpeded, at Louisiana Avenue, just past where currently the main gates are today. Next slide, please. Starting with the flight line district. As you heard in the video, the flight line experienced extensive damage. About 30% of the flight line facilities were more than 50 years old, and most of those buildings have been assessed as not repairable. As the Air Force considers some mission changes, which we also talked a little bit about, we are developing the flight line to be able to accommodate multiple new missions for Tyndall Air Force Base. Part of what we're looking at is increasing the ability to take additional missions on the flight line by reorganizing some of the way the buildings are organized. We are also looking at, as the future, how do we do mission operations more effectively, and how do the facilities support that? The options are actually very many different ways that we could do mission operations and how those facilities might look. In some cases, the ability to do single-point maintenance in a weather shelter that won't blow away in a storm may be the answer, and at the same time provide protection from the summer sun and the ubiquitous lightning within 5, which has a tendency to disrupt the flight line quite regularly at Tyndall. Next slide. In other scenarios, it may be combining ops and maintenance into a single facility. The synergy from co-locating operations and maintenance, as well as the reduced footprint, result in efficient operations, efficient land use, and reduced facility operating costs for the future. How we best utilize the flight line isn't limited just to flying ops. Equipment and vehicles also sustained quite a bit of damage during the hurricane. As we look at how we can be more resilient, sustain less damage, and recover faster from the next big weather event, we are looking at how we dual-purpose buildings, dual-purpose buildings so that we can meet more than one objective with a single facility. Such as single facilities to provide periodic medical service, maybe an immunization clinic on Monday, annual physical fitness assessments on Tuesday, with the option of food service and personnel services, one-stop shop within walking distance of the workplace. Another example of dual purposing could be a parking structure, where you day-to-day, we have a place to park our workers' vehicles, and if you have a hurricane or another severe weather event, you can shelter all the equipment and vehicles that were lost. So we are looking at several different options for multiple facilities and how do we best use the land. As we move to the support side of the base, unimpeded at ground level under Highway 98, the damage was less extensive. There were several functions which fared the storm with very little damage. These functions will anchor our future development. As you heard in the video and Colonel Matthews talk about, AF North came back fairly quickly. AFCEC, the rest of my organization, is back to work. 2 of our largest administrative organizations have already moved into their building as we finish the repairs to make them sustainable into the future. The commissary and the BX, the heart of the community support functions, are also back up and running. The redevelopment will build on these anchor activities. Next slide. One of the common themes you'll see in the redevelopment plans for the support district is what we're calling campus planning. Park your car once and walk to multiple destinations. Tyndall provides us a great opportunity for this kind of planning. While the support district didn't experience as much damage as the flight line, there was still significant damage to both the airmen dorms and the temporary lodging facilities. Both sets of facilities had known deficiencies and planned projects in the works prior to the hurricane. The hurricane exacerbated the needs to repair and rebuild those facilities. In addition, when we look at the number of facilities which need to be rebuilt, we'll be able to reshape the area to more efficiently use the land, allowing for expansion in the future if needed. Another idea that we are extremely excited about is a community commons. It truly is a one-stop shop for the airmen who live and work at Tyndall. Due to the number of functions needing a new home, we will have the opportunity to combine several activities into one building. This will allow us to build larger and more flexible spaces, which can be adapted as needs change in the future. Imagine getting your lunchtime chores done all in one stop: food, post office, haircut. Even better if we can do that within walking distance or biking distance of where you're working. In addition, we're looking at how do we make these facilities both resilient, with being able to withstand a disruption like a hurricane and then bounce back quickly, and then sustainable, meeting today's needs while also posturing for the future. As on the flight line, we are looking at how facilities can have secondary purposes in the event of emergency, such as how we are currently using spaces in the fitness center for a child care center, or our education and training facility, the NCO Academy, for offices and chapel services. Switching gears a bit, I'll conclude by focusing on the Sabre District. This area includes several recreation activities, as well as the family housing area, which you can see in the middle of the district. You can also see on the map that there is a lot of land in this district. The wing leadership has relocated the installation fence line on a temporary basis to improve access to the housing area. As we consider the fence line move for a permanent change, it opens up a whole new set of options for partnerships with the local community and industry. We'll see several potential options, such as a small convenience store, or a service station, or possibly meeting some of the temporary lodging requirements with a hotel which can be used both by personnel coming to Tyndall for temporary duty as well as the general public, or just coming to the area for recreation and leisure activities. Tyndall already had several recreation opportunities with a marina and limited hunting opportunities. We see expanding the recreation areas to serve more of Bay County as a fantastic opportunity. While we are extremely excited to have the opportunity to reshape Tyndall as we rebuild, we are taking a measured and deliberate approach to leverage the fantastic assets we already have. You can see the fitness center and Air North in this slide. As good stewards of the taxpayer dollars, we have repaired and are using many of our facilities today. Our Build Back plan will leverage the assets we have to ensure we're able to build back Tyndall as quickly as possible. The planning phase of Rebuild Tyndall is well underway. We are using a standard planning process, but on steroids. I've been calling it combat planning. How to do a master planning activity to ensure we build the facilities we need now, which will also endure for the next 50, 60, or 70 years. We're essentially doing an installation development plan, and for those of you familiar with this end of our business, and 3 district plans or area development plans in the next 2 months. We've built on the facility assessments to determine which facilities are savable and which need to go. We've started the process of matching customer needs with available facilities and identifying facilities which need to be rebuilt. As we've seen in some of the other slides, in some cases this has been super easy. Some facilities were flat out destroyed. We already are working with those customers to identify the requirements and begin design on new facilities in the next few months. We already know we're going to need a new chapel, a new small arms range, and to replace the Civil Engineering Center's research labs. Concurrent to identifying individual facility requirements, we have an ongoing master planning effort which will help determine the right facilities in the right place at the right time, and potentials for dual purposing facilities so that we're making sure we're making good investments for now and the future. The first phase of this effort will be done in April, at which time we'll move out on all the follow-on planning that we just can't get around, such as NEPA, and then moving into design and construction phases. While the long-term planning is ongoing, as you've seen, we aren't stopping with the needed repairs for recovery. At this time, we're estimating just this fiscal year we'll have between $200 million and $250 million worth of work to repair the damaged facilities that we're preparing to keep for long-term. And that is work, as Colonel Matthews said, a lot of building systems and roof repairs and getting those buildings back to being livable. We also are going to start planning and design for military construction this year. As requirements are identified, we will begin the process of doing planning charrettes and designs. We look forward to working with you in the near term via some of our traditional contracting mechanisms. As we move from recovery to rebuild, we have 4 phases that we're essentially following. We've been aggressively acquiring temp facilities and demolishing the buildings, beginning to demolish the buildings which were beyond repair, with the objective of getting to the minimum operating capability. As the rebuilding requirements are known, we'll begin with facility planning charrettes and the design process. From there, it will be game on for the reconstruction. As you've heard, we anticipate there being close to $3 billion in construction requirements. As we move through the planning process, we will continue to refine the number of facilities that we will be building and the cost estimates that go with them. As I turn the stage back to Colonel Matthews, I'll leave you with this graphic demonstrating the multiple levels of effort that we have ongoing right now. We have several teams working in several different levels of effort with our recovery teams, our rebuild teams, our planning teams. It is a very dynamic environment. And with that, I will turn it over to Colonel Matthews to talk a little bit more about why we're really here today, besides to share what we've been doing.
I'll just step back for a minute. You saw some of those timelines, and I know many of you, as we go to these different venues, that's really kind of important so you can start putting your teams together, start thinking about manning and what kind of support we're going to need. So just to unwind those numbers a little bit. So we are looking at the FSRM O&M dollars for fiscal year 19. That's a question I get asked quite frequently. How much do you think you will need? How much can you spend? And those aren't necessarily the same question of those that are in the business. And so the piece that I've had a lot of conversations about this is, right now, as I mentioned, as conditions change, that number is the best number I know today. But what we found is, as we got through that facility disposition review and looked at it, buildings we thought our initial estimates were to repair, it doesn't make sense to repair. So that's why you see some of the O&M numbers initially may have been higher. But as you look at repairs, we think that's the appropriate range right now, but I will say that will continue to adjust. The key to all of this, and many of you know, is if we're talking fiscal year 19, that contract has got to be awarded by 30 September. And we are still, I don't have a CTO to give you, a construction task order, those that are familiar, on the list of projects yet. We are still building that list. Every day, I know 325th CE with Colonel Askergren and Mr. Stahl, they are getting after it. We have asked for additional manning assistance from both our programmers, and that's the phase we're in right now, is to grab those requirements as we go through the master planning process. to develop a requirement, a statement of work, and get something to contracting, we know that we are under the gun, that we will have to get something to contracting probably around the 1st of April or middle of April if we're going to have a shot at getting something out on the street and awarded by 30 September. So working very closely with 325th Contracting Squadron. AFICA Commander visited here yesterday, Brigadier General Trevino. We also have the Corps of Engineers in force here. We are sitting in the same building, so very early on, Frank Seamus here from San Antonio, but he's embedded as our liaison, Corps liaison with the Air Force Civil Engineer Center in the days leading up to the storm and right after the storm, getting the support we need from Mobile District. And so that team is here as well with the suite of contracts that we already have there. We can leverage as much as possible. So that's where we're getting to, and we'll continue to release that. That's why we don't have a level of detail today that I know many of you hoped that we would have, but we thought it was important after these first, I'll call them 90 to 100 days, we at least needed to share where we are and what we're thinking and where we are in all this. And then that second slide is really the long-term rebuild. How do we get after these projects? And so I'll tell you, understanding how important it is to get the machine rolling, there are some things that we said early on we know we need to rebuild today, that master planning, we don't need to wait. And so we're getting out after some of that planning and design. We have the initial, I will tell you just kind of broadly, the first 3 MILCON projects are in the $40 million total range that we're going to try to get awarded either by the, this is speeding everybody, but I'm telling you, I'm pushing to get something awarded by 30 September or by 31st of December. What we're looking at, though, is, as Secretary Henderson mentioned earlier, it's funding and timing as well. So what authorities can we use? Are we going to have the MILCON dollars? If I don't have the MILCON dollars, we can't pursue MILCON in 19 unless we use a special authority. So one of the ones that we got several years ago was 2854, which allows us to use O&M in a MILCON-like way for natural disaster recovery. So we're looking at that as a potential option. But we're looking at everything available to us to be able to do that. And then we've already started what we're calling fiscal year 20 round 1 list of projects. We just got approved for the facility board, and that's in the, just shy of, I'll call it the $300 million range is just the first batch as we look at what we can start bringing back. Things like, one example, the picture you can see up there, CADM's range. We know the CADM's range is not worth in reinvesting in. We're looking at all options, but that is one that we already kind of have a standard design that we could use and make some modifications to and bring back here. Fire Station 2 did not make it through the storm. They're in modulars now. That's another one that is a fairly, I say simplistic, nothing simplistic as we look at how we're going to rebuild. So those are the kind of things, and we'll share as we get more of those. But that's the dollar figures, and then some of those at that $25 to $50 million on that one slide. The difference between the 200 and 300 and the 25 to 50 is some of those is AE services, it's demolition, it's AE services. That's why that pot's a little different. That first slide was primarily construction related, what we think to repair the facilities. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, and many people have said, we're not going to be able to do this alone. And I will tell you, as much as the brain power that we've had kind of working through this, none of us have all the right answers. I've quickly after the storm, I can't even remember the sheer number of how many of you have reached out to me through social media, through email, and others. I know I haven't returned as many of those as I've liked to. As I told someone, as we're recovering the base and doing all this on the fly, email is one of the least things I try to get to at the end of the day. Mr. Edwards, I try to answer his first. General Spacey's, and the rest we try to do in person. But this is where we really need your help. And so I will tell you, I'm very encouraged. There were some very senior level discussions probably within the last, I think it was 2 months, or it was December timeframe, meeting with the Corps, AFCEC, Air Force IMSC, Air Staff, to talk about what is it that we want to get after? How can we do this differently? I will tell you, to meet a deadline, if you will, the 2023, we know that's a flexible date, potentially. But to get there, we cannot do business as usual. I cannot award a 150 MILCON projects with each one having a 2 or 3 year timeline and try to do that. So what we're going to ask you, and we're not quite there yet, but we want to at least kind of whet your appetite, that we're going to ask for your input through the white paper process. And these are just some of the 4 areas, and I'll get to the details, but how can we take advantage of what industry is doing? And I know I had many of us, like a little voice in the back of my ear, and there's some other folks that, advise and talk to me and say, don't get up there and ask them for their great ideas, Scott. We ask them every time, and they say, you don't listen to us, you don't listen to us. And I know, we are. But every day, I should say, very often, we get this headquarters drill comes down and goes, I know you're busy, but by close of business tomorrow, I need any legislative proposals that you have for the next 2 years. What? 24 hours? Yeah, I need it today. So there is a team up there, they're working through those, but I really want you to think, really open your minds about what is it that's preventing us from doing it. We talked about, I know Samy's been working with industry, and they've had multiple sessions, and Mr. Niemeyer had talked through that as well, but what is it that we can get after? What ideas do you have that we can deliver this airfield turnkey in 3 years? What would it take to do that? I believe, and once again, this is a personal opinion, I think anything could be on the table. Now, we still have legal laws we have to go through. Those, could we change them if we need to? Is there an opportunity to reshape things if a supplemental request were through? I think all that's out there. So what are those ideas? So we're going to ask you, facility and infrastructure design, what are some things that we can do? I've shared this story with others at other SAMI events. For those that haven't heard it, I'll repeat it again. Where I work in Port San Antonio, down on the south side of San Antonio, what used to be the former Kelly Air Force Base, there's been construction as the port's been put in warehouses. They've been building administrative buildings. Lo and behold, last December, I'd come past this building. I've been away for a little bit, and we saw construction fence up there. And all of a sudden, within 2 days, I came back from TDY, the walls were going up. 3-story building, tilt-up panel construction. They put a, memory serves me, 90,000 square foot building up in less than a year, 3 stories, customizable to whatever the user would need. They built it for $10 million. They had did contractor at risk, or CM at risk, were able to find savings working with the contractor to get some savings. They were able to put in a redundant power system, another power feed into the building. They were able to fit it out for SCIF. So there was that full $10 million doesn't cover everything, because there were still some things that as they got users on the lease, they were going to build out. So it was a shell, essentially. But we're talking about some of those things for flexibility in the future. How do we change the inside and use what's out there today to make sure if I build you some type of building, it could be an MPF, it could be whatever the MPF is in the future, finance, or whatever it needs to be. So thinking through those, what can we do for designs? And then as I talked about that example there in San Antonio, that actually may be the picture, but it looks very similar. How can we leverage construction industry practices and not do the same old thing to get to where we need to go, but not sacrificing quality? I mean, we've got to compress a construction schedule. We've got to get the quality that we need. It's just at what price, and can we do it for a reasonable cost? Because this is all taxpayer dollars in the end. We can't afford to waste any single bit of it at all. And so that's why I will tell you, we wrestle a lot with how much money is too much to put into a facility I know I'm going to knock down, but I need it right now. Or as we balance modular facilities and what that cost is, either on a yearly basis or a buy basis, do we keep those? So looking for your ideas there. Amy, if she didn't whet your appetite on community partnerships, I don't know what else. We've been talking through that in the office extensively. Some wild ideas around the lunch table of what could be in there, but that piece of real estate out there, as Colonel Laidlaw mentioned, is great beachfront property. Well, how can we use that and help our airmen, help our community, the opportunities out there? And I know Taryn Judd is here, so community partnerships, and we're working with the installation on that. And then one of my favorite ones up there with all the others is project and program management. How can we deliver this integrated? Because as you look at this complex puzzle that we have to solve, what's very clear as we look at this program management office, it's almost a hybrid of what we used to do as a program management office, a program integration office to kind of pull that together, how we're going to work with the design and construction agents in there, but how do we deliver a comprehensive integrated schedule in timing and sequence with the ongoing missions around there. That is going to be a full-time job, to say the least. And to make sure, I'll tell you, the one thing that I'm going to challenge everyone, I know I've mentioned this to the folks in the office, the days, this is once again, I'll say personal opinion, so everyone down there, the days of building a facility and waiting 6 to 8 months to fit it out are over. We need to find a way to integrate. We know the F-35 is going to have the communication needs for it, the security needs, but we need to think about how we can deliver that all up front and not sit there with a building waiting on its warranty for 6 to 8 to 9 months to fit it out. So how can we do that and do it smarter to deliver it? Because that's time I think it's almost wasted time in my mind if it's ready and we just have to fit it out. So how can we work those things together? So how can we do that through program management? I'd love to hear your ideas. I think the Air Force would love to hear your ideas on how we can do that. Next slide. So these are the types of work I think many of you see in this room are part of this in one way or the other. Although we're doing master planning, there is a lot of planning yet to do, and some of that is what I call pre-design services beyond just what we think is traditional planning. The actual hard design, there's a lot of projects that we have to get after, and how do we take the best from around? And I think part of that is they shouldn't be in isolation. We should think about how we can design and build and bring in designers early to do that. So interested in your ideas. Demolition, how do we go ahead and get that slate clean again so we don't have to wait on that and do, as I mentioned, the utilities are privatized, so if we have to reroute utilities, we need to plan that in up front. Do we do the infrastructure layer and keep moving so we're not doing it all in sequence? It needs to be in parallel instead of series, and how we can work through that. So looking through your ideas of that as well. Next slide. So this is going to kind of be what we're thinking right now, the process. It is not releasable yet on what we're looking, but this is what our current thoughts are on the matter today. You see the website down there. You all should have a little card that was on your chair that has our link to the Air Force IMSC Tyndall PMO. We will use FedBiz Ops when we send this out as well, but just to let you know, we think we're going to release this in the next 30 to 45 days is our timeline that we're thinking through. And then we'd ask your submissions to begin 30 days from there. So I don't want you to be surprised to think, okay, you waited this long to release it, now you only gave me 30 days. We're trying to give you as much advance notice. And then as we take that input, as you go on to the next slide, please, we want to go through, read those papers, read through the things that are there, and then think about how that can shape Industry Day #2. And right now, just as a placeholder on the wall, we'll have to adjust other schedules, but we're thinking the May timeframe is when we release Industry Day #2. Okay, next slide. That should be right near the end as we go to the panel discussions. Once again, I know you've heard it a lot from different people that have been up here, and I say it a lot when I'm out in SAME or other venues, is that I really do appreciate you all being here. Understanding that many of us are away from our families for things, but with industry, we the Air Force, are a very, very demanding customer. The Corps of Engineers, our partner, is a demanding customer. I know you're going to sacrifice weekends, family holidays, late nights, kids' events, and I do appreciate that because it's going to take everyone in this room, all of us together, to get and rebuild Tyndall where we need to be. So thank you, and we're going to take, let's take 10 minutes and we're going to reset for the panel. Thank you.